All right. Hello for those of you on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and KGRADB. Hello to you guys. I appreciate you guys being here. And thank you for those of you who are on TikTok. Hello to you guys as well. Appreciate you being here. And now we're live on our Spreaker format. So we're live on all of our formats. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Happy, Good Friday to you. Of course, we're going to talk about this in just a second. Because we have a lot to go over, So first of all, if you want to, I want you to go to this one site, if you would, KGRAD as in dog, B as in bicycle.com, KGRADB.com. Make sure you put Bishop as your promo code when you subscribe, because you're going to get 30% off of your subscription. They have shows there. They have really a lot of cool shows. And it's very inexpensive to subscribe. And sometimes you just kind of like, okay, I really don't like what I'm seeing on television. So KGRADB, they sponsor the shows. So please consider going there and don't forget, Jennifer says she loves it. Thank you. And make sure you put Bishop as your promo code, because you're going to get, I guess, 30% off. Now you can go to my website. It's very simple. It's bishopjameslong.com. That's easy. bishopjameslong, LONG.com. That is my website. We do have a store that's available. If you want to go to the store, check it out. So more than welcome to check that out. And then, of course, the church's website is at usocc.org. usocc.org. So let me give you a couple heads up on what we're going to be doing, because tonight's going to do a little special. It's a little special presentation. So tonight today is Good Friday. And you guys know that I am, I've seen a live presentation on your church, the Satan's at the Cross. Yeah. You guys know that on every Friday, I do a paranormal show. That's what we do on Fridays, Paranormal Fridays. Look, we'll get to the paranormal. I promise you on the second hour at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll talk about the demons. We'll talk about the paranormal. We'll talk about all that scary. We'll talk about all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with it. I enjoy it. I love the paranormal, but there's a time and place. Thank you. And right now is not the time or the place. And so for us, I think what we need to do is I'm going to talk about the medical aspects of the crucifixion. We all know what happened. We read the scripture. We know, the fact that this happened to Christ. And here's the deal. A lot of a lot of people say, thank you. Let me just take care of this issue right here. Because there's a lot of people that are spreading misinformation. Can you imagine online? Can you imagine they're spreading misinformation? And there's a lot of people online saying that there's no historical proof that Jesus existed. Folks, only an ignorant person in history would say something like that. That's the God's honest truth. I'm sorry. Only a person who is truly ignorant in history, who have absolutely no training, no education at all in history. Because even the most devout atheist who have studied history, they will tell you, yeah, there's plenty of historical documentation that says that Jesus existed, Jesus of Nazareth existed. I mean, so the idea that we're actually debating in the 21st century if Jesus actually existed really does show how much sad and pathetic, and I guess, fight that people want to go through to try to spread this misinformation. So let me just make that clear to everybody that, yeah, we do have historical non-Christian sources that absolutely 100%, there's no question, we know that Jesus existed. So let me just say this on TikTok. First of all, for those of you who are offering gifts to the ministry, thank you. For those of you who are subscribing to the channel, thank you for that as well. For those of you who are trolls, you will be completely ignored. I won't. You're not going to get under my skin. You're not going to make me mad. You're not going to make me scream and shout and holler. We're all adults here. So this is not the channel for you. If you like doing that, if you like trolling and getting under the host's skin and just getting them spewing out the mouth, you're wasting your time. See, we are all adults. We're all adults here. We don't play in the kiddies' playground. So if you want to go do that, if you want to go play in the kiddies' playground, you go someplace else, because you'll be completely ignored, totally ignored. Now, as a matter of fact, for the first hour, I'm not even wanting to chat with the trolls. So for the first hour, sub chats only on TikTok. So if you're a subscriber, to the channel on TikTok. Thank you for that. And the only people that can chat with us right now on TikTok are people who are subscribing to the channel. And we do this because, unfortunately, on TikTok, there are a lot of trolls. Imagine that. I want to say something very quickly. Make sure that you add me on Rumble. So, look, we don't know what's going to happen with TikTok. We just don't know. We don't know. So I am going to be adding Rumble to the list of places where we're going to run the show. Now, it's very simple. If you go to Rumble and just type in Bishop James Long, all one word, there it is. You'll see my little channel. I have to fix it because I'm still learning how to do it. Mr. Producer was teaching me how to do it earlier today. And I'm naturally blind when it comes to these things. So if you're at Rumble, please, it's another platform, Patrick. It's another, like a video platform. And a lot of people like it. And so people have been telling me, you got to go to Rumble. You got to go Rumble. You got to go to Rumble. Because I wasn't in Clapper, but Clapper just really, it was nothing happened. And Instagram kept cutting me off. Oh boy, okay, you have a water infection. Goodness, we'll have to keep you in our prayers. Water Instagram kept cutting me off at the hour, and that was really frustrating. So someone knows I'll still run it on Instagram, but it keeps cutting me off. So I don't know how to fix that. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about Jesus' crucifixion. And we're going to talk about the historical aspects of it, and even from the medical perspective. That's really, really important. For those of you who who want to know a little bit about non-historical Christian sources that say that Jesus did exist, and that there are secular historical sources that also say that Jesus was crucified. So there really is no debate on this. The first century Roman Tacitus, who's considered one of the most accurate historians of the ancient world, mentioned superstitious Christians who suffered under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. And he actually wrote that there lived a man, or this Christus, or Christ, that many people said was the Messiah, and that was crucified. Flavius Josephus is the most famous Jewish historian writers. In his Antiquities, he refers to James, the brother of Jesus, who was called the Christ, who was crucified. And so there, and then of course Pliny the Younger, in Letters chapter 10, verse 96, recorded early Christian worship practices, including the fact that Christians worship Christ as God. They were very ethical, and it also talks about the Lord's Supper and that Jesus was crucified. The Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 43a, confirms Jesus' crucifixion on the eve of Passover. And the accusations against Christ, the accusations were he was practicing sorcery and Jewish apostasy. Lucian of Samosata was a 2nd century Greek writer who admits that Jesus was worshipped by Christians. So I can go on. I can go on and on and on. So to say that there are not non-Christian writers, it's just incorrect. So that's number one. So we know that Jesus was crucified. No doubt about it. So let's talk about it. And let's have a conversation. Now, some of these conversations may not be necessarily suitable for kids because I'm not going to hold anything back when it comes to what Jesus endured. And now, these were also some information that I'm going to be presenting to you. What came from Dr. C. Truman Davis, a physician's view on the crucifixion of Christ, and Dr. David Terasaka on the medical aspects of the crucifixion of Christ. So what they did is they did their own historical documentation, and from a doctor, from a medical perspective, they did some amazing dissertations on what Jesus would have experienced, what his body would have experienced while he was being crucified. And I understand that this is not ghosts and goblins and demons. I get it. But here's what we have to remember. That Jesus, even during Jesus' time, Satan was tempting him. Satan tempted him quite often. And remember, Satan is, he is an adversary. He's not your buddy. He's not your friend. He's never going to be your friend. You're never going to convert Satan. I'm going to tell you that right now. Those people who think that you're going to convert Satan, you are a fool. I've heard people say, well, I'm going to pray for Satan. You're wasting he doesn't want your prayers. He mocks your prayers. He's already been condemned. So you're not going to save Satan. Remember, he was in the presence of God, and even being in the very presence of God, he still rejected God fully. So people who think that somehow they're going to somehow save Satan, that's ego. Satan is the complete and total polar opposite of God. He wants total destruction of the human body. Why? Because we are the living temple of the Holy Spirit. That's desecration. It's one of the reasons why possession exists. He wants to desecrate the living temple, the image of God. You and me are created in God's image. And so how do you desecrate God's image? Through possession and torture. That is the ultimate form of desecration. So let's talk about the medical aspects, because I think it's important. I think one of the most painful things for me to acknowledge, and when I read the Passion and I watch the movie, the Passion of the Christ, was seeing Jesus mocked so viciously. And it's not, let's forget about the beliefs just for a moment. And yes, he is my Lord and Savior, absolutely. But remember, he did become the human visible form of the almighty invisible God. What bothers me, I think, the most about the mocking of Christ is the very little respect people have for the incredibly real pain that he endured during the last day in his life. Even if you're not a follower of Christ or a believer of Christ, I still would think that you would have enough empathy not to mock a human being. Let's take the divinity out of it. That you would mock a human being, and the torture that he endured was unbelievable. The torture that he endured is a pain that you and I could never, ever, ever imagine. And this presentation, hopefully, it brings the medical aspects, out to the light and to truly understand what he suffered during his crucifixion. And we're going to hopefully also talk about the Shroud of Turin as well, which I absolutely believe 1,000,000% is valid. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And remember, on TikTok, I'll open it up to everybody at the top of the hour at 9 p.m. And thank you. If I don't thank you for the gifts, I apologize. It's because I have two computers running at the same time. And sometimes I don't see the gifts if I'm looking at this camera. So for those of you who offer the gifts to the ministry, thank you. For those of you who are liking, thank you. I think when non-believers mock the cross, the crucifix, it really does bother me, because they're mocking the suffering of another human being, even if they don't believe. And that is, in essence, dehumanizing yourself for your own personal entertainment. It's not only despicable, in my opinion, it's heart-wrenching. I don't know, when did we grow so cold and callous? When did our hearts become like stone and mock such pain? These so-called people, even atheists, that they say that they stand for tolerance and respect and equality. Well, I mean, even if you disagree that Jesus is God incarnate, why would you mock someone's torture? Doesn't make sense. Remember, there's tolerance, respect, and where's the tolerance and respect? Certainly in equality for Christ. You can choose, if you want, to not believe in him. That's your right. You can choose not to accept him. That's your right. You can choose whatever you wish, but you cannot deny his human suffering. So let's get into it. And this information extracted from articles that were, again, I talked about, that were written by physicians, and hopefully this will give you a perspective. But of course, remember, the physical passion of the Christ began in Gethsemane. And of the many aspects of the initial suffering, one of the greatest physiological interest is the bloody sweat. It is interesting that St. Luke, the physician, by the way, he was a physician, is the only one to mention it. And he says, and being in agony, he prayed the longer, and his sweat became as drops of blood trickling down upon the ground. So every trick imaginable has been used by modern scholars to explain away this description. They say, oh, it can't happen. It can't happen. Apparently under the mistaken impression that it's all make-believe, that people don't sweat blood. A great deal of effort could have been saved had the doubters just consulted medical literature. Though very rare, the phenomenon of hematotrosis, Drosses. It's a bloody sweat. It's well documented. And hematidrosis is pretty severe. It's under great emotional stress, the one that Christ suffered. Tiny capillaries in his sweat glands can break, thus mixing blood with sweat. And that process might well have produced marked weakness and even possible shock. And hematidrosis has been seen in patients who've experienced extreme stress or shock in their systems. So we've seen this. A case, and by the way, in history is recorded in which a young girl who had a fear of air raids in World War I developed the condition after a gas explosion occurred in the house next door. And another report mentions a nun as she was threatened with death by the swords of the enemy soldiers. She was so terrified that she bled from every part of her body. She died of hemorrhage in the sight of her assailants. So after the arrest in the middle of the night, Jesus was next brought before the Sanhedrin, the high court, and Caiaphas, the high priest. And it is here that the first physical trauma was inflicted. See, a soldier struck Christ across the face for remaining silent when questioned by Caiaphas. You were not allowed to be quiet. If you were questioned by Caiaphas, the high priest, you were required to speak up. That was seen as an insult. And again, at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll get to your paranormal questions. People are asking me about demon questions. I'll get to them at 8 o'clock. So the palace guards then blindfolded him and mockingly taunted him to identify them as they each passed by. They spat upon him and struck him in the face. So many times what they did is, of course, they had the blindfold and they punched him as hard as they could, obviously breaking, certainly causing major problems. Who knows what they've done. I mean, the body, just the face alone would have been so battered and bruised. And then as they punched them, they said, now who did that? Which soldier did that? And another one come and punch him and hit him in the nose. And another punch him right in the jaw. And they did it over and over and over and over. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. And in there, so after they stopped, because they were kind of bored, in the early morning, so he's truly battered and bruised, dehydrated. Remember, he had bled sweat because he knew what was about to happen, the crucifixion. And he was dehydrated. He was exhausted. I'm sure he did not sleep. And Jesus is then taken across the praetorium of the fortress Antonia. That's the seat of the government of Judea. That's Pontius Pilate. And we're all familiar. We're not going to go over with Pontius Pilate actions in attempting to pass responsibility to Herod. Jesus, apparently, he suffered no physical mistreatment at the hands of Herod. So he was returned to Pilate. Herod said, I don't want to deal with you. Go to Pilate. So Pilate is unable to convince the crowd of Jesus' innocence and orders Jesus to be put to death. Now, some historical sources say that it was a Roman law that a criminal that was to be crucified had to be flogged first. They had to be beaten first. Others believe that Jesus was flogged first by Pilate in the hope of getting him off with a lighter punishment. Well, I actually believe that they probably did flog them. And here's why. Thank you very much. Crucifixion, it could take up to 3 days for someone to pass away. And it was quite torturous. And so what they had a kind of a rule that they would flog a prisoner prior to being crucified in hopes that they would be one whip away from death. That way the person would expire faster. Because they certainly didn't want all, because the Romans were quite efficient and proficient, actually, with the crucifixion. Now, in spite of his efforts, the Jews allowed Barabbas to be released because that was the custom at that time, and demand that Jesus be crucified. And they even cried, his blood be on us and our children. Said that Matthew chapter 27, verse 25. And Pilate handed Christ over to be flogged and crucified. Now, some people think that Pilate was saying, okay, well, if we flog him and they see how horribly deformed his body is after flogging, maybe they'll just say, okay, let's just enough, leave it alone, go away. Okay, we've had enough. It wasn't enough. So it is at this point that Christ suffers a severe physical beating that none of us could possibly even imagine. None of us. So during a flogging, a victim was tied to a post, leaving his back entirely exposed, as well as his legs. Now, the Romans used a whip called the flagellum. It consisted of small pieces of bone and a metal attached to a number of leather strands. So the leather strands was rather long. And the point of the leather strands and they had bones embedded inside these strands. The reason was the bones is because when the whip would go around the body and they would yank, it would yank flesh off of the body. And that was the point. So when the bones, when it would go across the body, the back or the leg, and they yanked, the bone would embed in the skin. So as they pulled as hard as they could, flesh would be pulled off of the body. So the number of strikes is actually, some people, it's really not recorded in the Gospels. The number of blows in Jewish law was actually set in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 3. So the Jewish law says that if someone is to be flogged, they are to be flogged at 40 floggings. Now, can you imagine? I can't even imagine one being hit one time. And these whips going around your body, and then a massive soldier yanks that whip, and then skin just peels off of your body. Now I can't even imagine just one, let alone 40. But actually, in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 3, so the law said 40, but it was later reduced to 39. Because the victim often died from the beating, and they were never crucified because the beating was so severe that they would lose. We have a gallon of blood in our system. They would lose so much blood that they would ultimately die out from the blood. So 39 hits were believed to bring the criminal to, quote, one from death. And Roman law did not put any limits on the number of blows given. So the Romans didn't care. The Romans, they could hit somebody 100 times. But really, they would whip the soldier. They would whip the person so badly, but only from one blow from death. And they would stop there. Now, you have to remember, and again, even if you're not a Christian, when you understand the historical aspects of this, it is truly barbaric. It is absolutely barbaric. And Christ was not the only one crucified. So let's understand that. And at first, the thongs cut through the skin only, so the leather straps. Then as the blows continue, they cut deeper in the subcutaneous tissues, producing first an oozing of blood from the capillaries and veins of the skin, and then finally spurting arterial bleeding from vessels in the underlying muscles. So basically, it would be, quite bluntly, it would be squirting blood. And it would blur, obviously, quite viciously. I mean, bleeding everywhere. And the small balls of lead that was at the end, the reason is they did that is because it produced large, deep bruises. And they are often broken open by subsequent blows. So that really is kind of how they cause the body, the skin, to be so bruised that it's easier to rip the skin off the body, as grotesque as that is. And so finally, the skin of the back is hanging in long ribbons, and the entire back is, and even legs, it's unrecognizable mass of torn, bleeding tissue. There's no way, if you were to see Jesus or anybody who was crucified and they were flogged 39 times, their back would no longer look like a back. So they would have skin, long strands of skin hanging off of it, and you could see their entire bones. You could see everything, their muscles. You would not be able to recognize that was a human back. Or even legs, and the buttocks. Now, if you just let that, just a moment, Just let that sink in. And for anybody, I don't care if you're an atheist or not, but if you're going to make fun, then there's something not right mentally with anybody who would make fun of that, even if you don't believe Jesus is the Messiah. I would never want anybody. Well, Diane, that's the next question, isn't it? And we'll get to that. So when it was determined by the centurion in charge that the prisoner is near death, then the beating is stopped. And the half-fainting Jesus is then untied, and he's allowed to slump to the stone pavement, wet with his own blood and his skin hanging off his body. The soldiers stripped him naked and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted a crown of thorns and set it on his head. And they put a staff in his right hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him, "Hail, King of the Jews." They spit on him. And then they took the staff that they gave him and hit him on the head repeatedly. Now, Jesus was then beaten by the Roman soldiers. In mockery, they actually dressed him in what was probably a cloak of a Roman soldier, and that was colored dark purple or scarlet. And he wore the crown of thorns, and unlike the traditional crown, which is depicted with an open ring, the actual crown of thorns may have covered the entire scalp. And it is believed that the thorns are very thick, and they're very strong in Israel, really strong. So they're not easily breakable. So the thorns were probably about 1 to 2 inches long. And then the Gospels state that Roman soldiers continued to beat Jesus on the head over and over. And so therefore the blows would drive the thorns deep into the scalp, one of the most vascular areas of the body, and the forehead. And that caused even more severe bleeding. But not only that, but the pain and suffering that it caused with the crown of thorns being slammed into the head, the pain would have shot through the entire body, causing immediate shock. The unbelievable pain that he would have experienced just with the crown of thorns alone would have been enough to stop anybody from even walking. Now, it's pretty terrible. So finally, they get tired of their sadistic sport. And then what they did is they played around with him for a while. And of course, during this time, it was warm. And so they tore the robe. And this, by the way, this is all on historical documentation from non-Christian writers as well. They tore the robe from his back. Now, people don't understand. Remember, already having adhered to the clots of blood and serum in the wounds, its removal caused excruciating pain, just as in the careless removal like of a surgical bandage, and almost as though he were again being whipped, and the wounds were ripped wide open once again. So remember, this cloth was placed on his back. The blood was drying up because it was the sun was beating down on it. So it was drying up. And then they would peel. It's like the hardest tape you can put on a surface and just peel it all off. So as they yanked it off, then everything was just ripped right off of him. While he's having the crown of thorns, still wearing the crown of thorns. So every move he made, the excruciating sharp pain going down his body was amplified. Now, the severity of the beating is not detailed in the Gospels. However, in the book of Isaiah, it does suggest that the Romans pulled out his beard. In Isaiah chapter 50, verse 8, it also mentioned that Jesus was beaten so severely that his form did not look like that of a son of man. In other words, a human being. So the literal translation says on that verse, so marred from the form of man was his aspect, that his appearance was not as that of a son of man. So people were actually appalled to look at him. That's what scripture says in 52 verse 13. His disfigurement may explain why he was not easily recognized in his post-resurrection appearance. So he was so disfigured that Isaiah, the suffering servant, talks about how the beard is ripped and the skin is ripped, so hanging off the jaw. So from the beating, Jesus walked on a path now known as the Via Dolorosa. It's the way of the suffering. That's what it's known, to be crucified at Golgotha. So the total distance, people believe, is estimated to be about 650 yards. It's a narrow street of stone. It was probably surrounded by markets in Jesus' time. 650 yards. Now that is 6 football fields and more. Actually, 7 if you actually count the extra 50, or maybe even 8. And he was led through the crowded streets carrying the crossbar and across his shoulders. And the crossbar weighed about 80 to 110 pounds. He didn't carry the whole entire cross. That would have been impossible. So it was a crossbar. So you had the large staff, if you will, and then of course on top of it is where the crossbar was. And in spite of his efforts to walk upright, the weight of the heavy wooden beam, together with the shock produced by the copious blood loss, is way too much. He stumbles, he falls. And the rough wood of the beam gouges into the lacerated skin and muscles on the shoulders. I'm sorry. I've said this before. I am convinced that the only way he was able to get to Pontius Pilate, where he was flogged, beaten viciously, unrecognizable, the only way he was able to get there to Golgotha was because he was God incarnate. No human being could have endured what he endured and made 7, 8, football fields to Golgotha. No human being could have done it. And I absolutely, I've said this before. I think the only thing that kept him going was one more step for Bill, one more step for Richie, one more step for Diane, one more step for Justin, one more step for Jennifer, for Michelle, for Jackie. One more step. And I really, truly believe that is the only way he was able to get to where he was, to Golgotha. Thank you, Chad. So he tries to rise, but human muscles have been pushed beyond their endurance. And the centurion, anxious to get on with the crucifixion, he obviously has Simon of Cyrene to carry the cross. And Jesus follows, still bleeding and sweating, the cold, clammy sweat of shock. And finally, he gets to Golgotha. So Jesus is offered wine mixed with myrrh. It's a mild a sedative, a pain mixture kind of a thing, but he doesn't drink it. So Simon is ordered to place the cross beam on the ground, and Jesus quickly is thrown backward on the ground. So they don't lay him down, they push him, obviously, with his shoulders against the wood and his head slamming against the ground itself. And the procedure of crucifixion may be summarized as follows. So the cross bar, it was put on the ground, and the victim laid upon it. So obviously with their arms stretched out. The nails are about 7 inches long. The diameter is about 3/8 of an inch. And they were driven into the wrists. They were not driven into the palms. They were driven right here in the wrist. And I'll explain why in just a second. And the points would go into the vicinity of what's called the median nerve. This is where your median nerve is, causing shocks of pain to radiate through the arms. Have you ever had experience where your body or your limbs it burnt? It fell asleep, and it really felt like it was on fire. That's what it would have felt like through the entire body. Now, keep in mind, at this time also, Jesus is experiencing severe Charlie horses, as well as other spasms throughout his entire body because of the dehydration. So his muscles are spasming severely. Now, if you've ever had a Charlie horse, just a Charlie horse alone, I've had them, and they are the most painful experiences in the world. Well, his whole body would now be experiencing this without any relief. So these shocks of pain would radiate to the arms. It was possible to place the nails between, there's 2 bones here. so that no fractures, no broken bones occurred. And studies have shown that the nails were probably driven through the small bones of the wrist, since nails of the palm of the hand, it wouldn't support the weight of the body. There's just this cartilage here. There's nothing here. It would just simply fall, quite honestly, it would just rip right apart. So they nailed right here in the palm. I'm sorry, in the wrist. In ancient terminology, by the way, the wrist was considered part of the hand. And standing at the crucifix sites would, so what would happen is at the crucifix sites would be the upright post. And that's called the stipes. It stood about 7 feet high. And in the center of the stipes was a crude seat. Not really the great seat, but it's called the sedulum. And that served a support, if you would, for the victim. Now, the crossbeam, what was then lifted on the stipes. So what they would do is they would nail his wrist to the crossbeam, and they would lift it up, and they would use ropes and lift him up. So his body was, as terrible as it sounds, his body was hanging on this crossbar, and his body was dangling down until they eventually lifted it up over the stipe and they slammed it on. So his body would have completely jerked. That, I can't even imagine. The feet were then nailed to the stipes. And to allow for this, the knees had to be bent and rotated laterally, being lifted in a very uncomfortable position. And the titulus was hung above the victim's head. So as he pushes himself upward, and of course the nails would go into the feet, which obviously nerves there's so many nerves there. I mean, you if you've ever had a feet issue where a nerve really hurt, you know how painful that is. But now every one of them have been slammed with this. So basically his feet were there, and they would slam the nail through them. Now, what you do when you're crucified, so he would push himself upward to avoid the stretching torment. So he places his full weight on the nail through his feet. He had to do that in order to get breath into the lungs. So he would lift up, and then the pain was so bad, he'd just fall right back down. So again, they're the searing agony of the nail tearing through the nerves between the metatarsal bones of the feet, which again, you think of nerves, pretty violent. So, and this is why it's important to talk about this. Thank you for this is why it's important to not sugarcoat this, because this is what Christ endured. And at this point, the arms are fatigued. He's having now spasms everywhere in his body, everywhere in his back, his arms, his legs, everywhere. There's spasm, and then no one there to massage them out. I can't imagine that. Thank you, Mullet. And great waves of cramps sweep over the muscles, knotting them in a deep, relentless, throbbing pain. And with these cramps comes the inability to push himself upward. He just simply can't, because every time now he tries to push himself upward, the cramps would be so severe. So hanging by his arms, the pectoral muscles are now paralyzed, and the intercostal muscles are unable to act. So air can be drawn into the lungs, but it cannot be exhaled. So Jesus fights to raise himself in order to get even one short breath. And then finally, carbon dioxide builds up in the lungs and in the bloodstream, and the cramps partially subsides. And spasmodically, he is able to push himself upward to exhale and bring in the life-giving oxygen. So Jesus experienced hours of limitless pain. I can't, if we just reflect on that just for a moment, it according to Scripture. So around 8 a.m., Jesus in Matthew condemns Jesus to death. So then you have Jesus is crucified around 9 o'clock in the morning. That's according to Mark. So from 9 until 12, he's having these excruciating pains and spasms. And then Matthew says in Matthew chapter 27, verse 45, that darkness covers the land. And then at 3 p.m., Jesus dies. So Jesus, from crucifixion, of the start of crucifixion, which is 9 a.m. until Jesus expiring, was 3 p.m. So for 6 hours, he endured unspeakable pain. And of course, even prior to that, being flogged. So the cycles of twisting, joint rending cramps, intermittent partial asphyxiation, searing pain, where tissue is torn from his lacerated back as he moves up and down against the rough timber. Then another agony begins. A terrible, crushing pain deep into the chest as the pericardium slowly fills with serum and begins to compress the heart. So one remembers again Psalm 22, verse 14. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. This is, of course, Jesus' crucifixion. We see that prophecy is being fulfilled. Now, well, thank you, Bishop Ron. So it's almost over. And the loss of tissue fluids have reached a critical level. So the compressed heart is now struggling to pump heavy, thick, sluggish blood into the tissue. And the tortured lungs are making a frantic effort now to grasp even small gulps of air. And the markedly dehydrated tissues send their flood to stimuli the brain. And then Jesus gasped his fifth cry, and he says, I thirst. And one remembers another verse from the prophetic Psalm 22. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaveth to my jaws, and thou hast brought me into the dust of death. So a sponge, it's a cheap sour wine. That was a stable drink of the Roman legionnaires, is lifted up to his lips. Now, he doesn't take it. And so death by crucifixion would have come about in the following manner. The shallowness of breathing causes small areas of the lungs to collapse. Decreased oxygen and increased carbon dioxide causes acidic conditions in the tissues. Fluid builds up in the lungs and makes the situation, obviously, this worse. And his heart is stressed and eventually fails. And the slow process of suffering and resulting death during a crucifixion really can be summarized in this way. And this is from a medical perspective. So here, it appears likely that the mechanism of death in crucifixion was suffocation. The chain of events which ultimately led to suffocation are as follows. With the weight of the body being supported by the sedulum and the arms were being pulled upward, this caused the intercostal and pectoral muscles to be stressed. And furthermore, movement of these muscles was opposed by the weight of the body. With the muscles of respiration thus stretched, the respiratory bellows became relatively fixed. And this developed, and pain in the wrists and arms increased. The victim was forced to raise the body off the seat, the sedulum, therefore transferring the weight of the body to the feet, where there was nails. Respirations became easier, but with the weight of the body being exerted on the feet, pain in the feet and legs mounted. When the pain became unbearable, the victim again slumped down on the sedulum with the weight of the body pulling on the wrist and again stretching the intercostal muscles. Thus, the victim alternated between lifting his body off the sedulum in order to breathe and slumping down on the sedulum to relieve pain in the feet. And finally, he became exhausted or lapsed into unconsciousness so that he could no longer lift his body off the sedulum. And in this position, With the respiratory muscles essentially paralyzed, the victim suffocated and passed. So due to the shallow breathing, the victim's lungs began to collapse in small areas, causing hypoxia and hypercarbia. And it's a respiratory, of course, with respiratory distress with lack of compensation by the kidneys due to the loss of blood from the numerous beatings resulted in an increased strain on the heart, which beats faster and faster to compensate. Fluid builds up in the lungs, and under the stress of hypoxia, the heart eventually fails. And there are several different theories on the actual cause of death. One theory states that there was a filling of the pericardium with fluid, which put a fatal strain on the ability of the heart to pump blood. And another theory states that Jesus died of cardiac rupture. The actual cause of death, Jesus' death, however, may have been multifactorial, which I believe, and related primarily to shock, exhaustion, asphyxia, and of course, acute heart failure. So now the body of Jesus is now in extremes, and he can feel the chill of death creeping through his tissues. And this realization brings out his 6 words, possibly little more than a tortured whisper: "It is finished." So as the mission of atonement is completed, and finally he can allow his body to pass. And with one last urge, he once again presses his torn feet against the nails, strengthens his legs, takes a deeper breath, and utters his 7th and last cry: "Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit." Now, to confirm that the victim was dead, the Romans inflicted a spear wound through the right side of the heart. See, when pierced, the Romans knew anatomy quite well. And when pierced, a sudden flow of blood and water came from Jesus' body. So the medical significance of the blood and water has been a matter of debate. One theory states that Jesus died of massive myocardial infarction, actually, in which the heart ruptured, which may have resulted from his falling while carrying the cross. Another theory states that Jesus' heart was surrounded by fluid in the pericardium, which constricted the heart and caused death. And the physical stresses of crucifixion may have produced a fatal cardiac arrhythmia, which makes sense to me. The stated order of blood and water may not necessarily indicate the order of appearance, but rather the relative prominence of each fluid. So there was clearly water built up in the heart sac. And in this case, a spear through the right side of the heart would allow the fluid buildup in the lungs to escape first, followed by a flow of blood from the wall of the right ventricle. And the important fact is that the medical evidence supports that Jesus did die a physical, painful death. So for those of you who may still not agree that Jesus is your Lord and Savior, that's fine. But I do hope that perhaps maybe after this presentation, those people who mocked the crucifixion and mocked Christ, maybe, just maybe, a little bit of humanity still exists within that person, because I certainly don't think this is funny. A man endured all this in the flesh. At the very least, show respect for the sanctity of life. And if you can't even do that, then there's no humanity left in that person. And for those people ask me all the time about why would Jesus say, and many of you may not know this, but why would Jesus say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why would Jesus say that? Folks, he was praying. He was fulfilling prophecy. Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, I find no rest. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted and delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Yet you brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you, even at my mother's breast. From birth I was cast on you. From my mother's womb you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. Many bulls surround me. Strong bulls of Bashan encircle me. Roaring lions that tear their prey open their mouths wide against me. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It is melted within me. My mouth is dried up. like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Dogs surround me. The pack of villains encircle me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. But you, Lord, do not be far from me. You are my strength. Come quickly to help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of the lions and save me from the horns of the wild oxen. I will declare your name to my people. In the assembly, I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All your descendants of Jacob, honor him. Revere him, all you descendants of Israel. For he has not despised or scorned the suffering or the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. For you comes the theme of my praise in the great assembly. Before those who fear you, I will fulfill my vows. The poor will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek the Lord will praise him. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth will be remembered and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him, for dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. All the rich of the earth will feast and worship. All who go down to the dust will kneel before him. Those who cannot keep themselves alive, posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet unborn, he has done it. Unbelievable. That, my friends, is very, very powerful. Again, I just when you listen to this, and it's just one of those things. Well, Richie, no one can help you. Christ can help you. And we have got to stop. We have got to stop putting demons here and God here. Knock it off. Enough is enough. We are a society. I don't know why we do this, but we are a society to put demons way up here and God way down here. We want to. Oh, the demons are doing the call upon God. Oh, I have. Well, no. If you call upon God, then you know the demons are going to tremble in fear. So there is no negotiating. And I'm telling you this as an exorcist. I won't see myself ever as a victim of a demon. I won't ever see myself as a victim of Satan. Satan is a coward. Satan is a dirty, rotten, low-life, egg-sucking dog. There's nothing good about Satan. There's nothing good about demons. The moment that you start saying to me, oh, demons are they're doing this, then you are victimizing yourself. Knock it off. You call upon God, and then God will take care of it. Do you not know that you have legions of angels that you can call upon that can whip the devil's butt right now from here to kingdom come? You know what? You can go to church every single day. Just because you go to church, that has nothing to do with faith. Anybody can go to church. I know people who go to church every single Sunday, and as soon as they leave church, they're condemning this person to hell and that person to hell. That doesn't mean you have faith. You see, let me tell you, when I pray to God, I know the devil trembles in fear. And when you pray to God, you need to know the devil trembles in fear. That's it. Non-negotiating. It's over. Because if you keep thinking to yourself that you are a victim, the devil will continue to victimize you until the day you breathe your last breath. So continue to think you're a victim, and you will be a victim. The devil loves to do that. But here's what we live in: a society where for some reason we have elevated the devil so high up. And then we say, well, have you prayed to God? Yeah, but there's no yeah, but to it. See, it's non-negotiable. And I work demonic cases. I have performed 30 exorcisms on people who are truly possessed. So I walk in the face of demons. I walk in the very presence of someone who is truly possessed by a real demon or demons. And I have no fear whatsoever. None at all. I have no fear. Because number one, demons are cowards. Number two, they're parasites. They're cockroaches. And We are created in God's image, not them. So if you're going to think, people are always saying to me, demons, 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 demons. Okay, I understand it. I get it. But you have got to stand on your own 2 feet, and God is the higher power. That's exactly right. But you're more than no, Richie. No. That's your big mistake, friend. I'm just a ghost hunter. You see, that's right there. What you just said, Richie, and everybody else. Let me make this very clear to you. You are much more than a ghost hunter, which, by the way, I hate that term. You're not a ghost hunter. You're a child of God. So if you are a parent and your child comes to you and says, I need help, this person is bullying me, I guarantee you that you as a parent would put a stop to it. You would put a stop to it right away. And rightfully so. So why wouldn't you think that God would do the same for you? He will. You have to absolutely. The way I live my life, every day, my mantra is, I will not be your victim. I won't. I won't be trolls. The trolls that love. I have been called everything but my name by these trolls, and yet they don't realize that they're actually being manipulated by the devil himself. But I'm not going to be their victim, and I'm not going to be demons' victims. I'm not going to be Satan's victim, because I am victorious, and you are victorious because we have been completely taken care of by Christ through the crucifixion, gaining us eternal life. Well, okay, Rich, but again, it starts with you, buddy. You can't listen to me. I've got a lot of people watching, and I don't mind talking to you, but I got a lot of people talking, asking questions. So, Rich, let me just make this very clear. I understand you say no church will help you. I get it. I understand that. But don't you understand that you can help yourself? It starts with you. It doesn't matter. I can live right next door to you, and I could be there every single day with you, blessing you every single day. It will do nothing. Let me make this very clear. It will do absolutely nothing until you get out of that victim mentality. Because if you stay in that victim mentality, you're going to remain in that victim mentality. And the demons are going to absolutely utilize that over and over and over and over. And you will remain a victim over and over, no matter what any clergy member does. It starts with you saying, enough. I have had it. I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I have had it. In a discussion, that's it. That's it. And once you start realizing that you're not a victim, and once you knock that off and you change that mentality, then healing can begin. But it starts with you. It doesn't start with clergy. We can help. Okay, fine. But no matter what I do, no matter how many blessings, no matter how many exorcisms, the fact is, it starts with the person saying, I'm not going to be the victim anymore. And that's where you have to start there. And you need to, Rich. And Richie, I'm going to suggest we have night prayer also every Monday through Friday. Every Monday through Friday, we have night prayer. Come to night prayer. Come to night prayer. It's at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I don't know where it is where you are. But come to night prayer, and we'll be happy to pray for you. And if you really want to piss off the demon or Satan or whatever is causing a malevolent spirit, play some Gregorian chant. Play some Gregorian chant. Open up the windows. Let the light come into your life. It is all the vibration. You have to elevate your vibration. You have to elevate this. If you stay in the lower levels of vibration, you're going to remain there. Good. And you have to, Richie, you have to stay there. You have to stay there. Okay. Yeah, he is. Folks, remember, I have two different computers running at the same time. So I have a chat. I have a lot of people asking me questions on Messenger. I have Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, KGRADB radio. I have TikTok. So we're all kinds of places. Okay, I'm going to open up the chat now to everybody on TikTok, and we'll go from there. That's weird. Let me do something real quick. Oh, there. Okay. Yeah, the Shroud of Turin. I believe the Shroud of Turin is legitimate. Matter of fact, I want to share something with you that I shared with the Mr. Producer. This was actually placed on the Shroud of Turin. It's been a while ago, and so I have this in my home. This is actually the Shroud. Well, this is not the Shroud, but this is a smaller version of the Shroud. And of course, here you see the crown, you see the blood and the whippings, of course, the crucifixion of the nails, and on further. And so this was actually placed on the Shroud of Turin, so it's considered a relic. I want to talk a little bit about. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that, Jan. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the Shroud of Turin because I do believe that this shroud is legitimate. And memory loss. Oh, certainly will. Certainly will. Yeah. And by the way, so tonight, I want to remind everybody, here's the dilly. Here is the dilly. Tonight, we have a Bible study for Good Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will run on TikTok. I will run it on TikTok. And as a matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll just stay on TikTok. We'll go live, and I'll call Miss Wilma. We'll go live. And we go live at 9 p.m. So I'll just stay live with TikTok. And then, of course, we're going to be going live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We'll be going live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 9 p.m. So just heads up on that. And then, of course, we have a 10 o'clock night prayer. So we're going to be busy tonight. So if you want to be a part, if you want to be a part of the Bible study, you can certainly do that. We'd love to have you, and go from there. If you have a question, you got to, instead of saying I have a question, just ask the question, because I've got lots of people I'm interacting with on chat. So it's best just to say, hey, got a question, and I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. But I do want to talk about the Shroud of Turin as well. So if you have questions, go ahead and jump in. Oh, you felt weak after service today? It could be a million things. I would never. Was a Shroud of Turin discussing? It's not. I'm getting ready to do that now. Well, I agree, Rob. I agree, but that's kind of something that it's. I don't know if not something you're supposed to do as kind of a mockery, but okay. So if we have questions, you need to ask now, because I've got to go. I got to go talk about the Shroud of Turin. Oh, well, thank you, Lorraine. Sorry. So if people are asking questions, I'm trying to get. I've talked about psychics. We've already had the conversation about that. All right. Okay. So here's what I'm going to go into the Shroud of Turin, because I've been waiting. I can't keep waiting to holding the show up. I've got to go. I've got to move forward. So that's why I said, instead of saying, hey, I have a question, it's best just to say, what's the question? And then I can try to answer it. Oh, sorry. I believe so. Jess is asking you angels speak to people. Certainly, because we have guardian angels. Oh, I think it's definitely respectful to watch the movie, The Passion. Okay. Let's get into the the Shroud of Turin chat. And again, if it gets disrespectful on TikTok, I'll just put sub chat only. So that way you can watch it, but you'll have to be a subscriber. As long as people are disrespectful, we'll keep it open for everybody. But once it gets disrespectful, I'm taking sub chat only on. Okay, the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin is a long linen cloth. It's actually made out of flax, and it measures 14 feet long and 3.5 feet wide. And it bears the faint image of a bearded, crucified man with bloodstains that match the wounds of crucifixion suffered by Jesus of Nazareth, as recorded in all four gospel narratives, by the way. It has been in Turin, Italy since 1578, over 400 years. And prior to that, it was in France for another 200 years, I agree, beginning in 1356. And it has been preserved and revered for centuries of the actual burial shroud that wrapped Jesus. It was owned from 1450 to 1982 by the royal Savoy family, until the former king of Italy passed away and willed it to the Catholic Church. And the shroud has been displayed for numerous public exhibitions over the past 650 years, when in Italy, the Catholic Church acted as a custodian of the cloth, even though it was officially owned by the Savoys. Now, a little bit of history on this, just in case if you guys don't know. The history prior to its arrival in France is not continuous, and therefore critics have alleged it's the work of a medieval artist, which is absolutely idiotic. And I'll tell you why. It truly is. Anybody who believes that, boy, you are so lost. The discovery of a key document in 1993, a Hungarian Pray manuscript dated in 1192, actually confirms that the shroud was in Constantinople and was stolen by crusaders during the Fourth Crusade. So we know this. And that bridges the gap between 1204 and 1356, when the shroud's whereabouts was in question. Some say it was in possession of the Knights Templar, who participated in the Fourth Crusade, were said to have venerated a mysterious image that they say. And the finding is actually monumental because it validates a very historical trail to at least to the year 544, when the image, not made by hands, was discovered in southern Turkey and became the genesis for all Byzantine Orthodox icon images of the Christ that followed. Now, I absolutely believe that this was true. Two coins were minted in 692 under the reign of Emperor Justinian II, and they were their first coins ever minted with an image of Christ and appear to be based on the shroud image, as indicated by the 180 matching points. And in 944, the cloth was actually taken from Edessa to Constantinople. And the sermon delivered by Gregory the Archdeacon clearly describes a full body image on the linen. Oh, I'm sorry, Nana. So in the 11th century, Greek chronicler John painted a picture of the same event as part of an illustrated manuscript. It clearly shows the general of the army presenting a long linen cloth with an image on it to Emperor Romanus. So following the Fourth Crusade, when troops from Venice and France looted and burned the city, a letter of protest was written to Pope Innocent III. The letter documents this horrific event and what was stolen, including, quote, most sacred of all, the linen in which our Lord Jesus Christ was wrapped after his death and before his resurrection. So these and other historical clues provide a history stretching nearly 1,500 years. Now, so we know, look, in 1898, the shroud was photographed for the first time. And these pictures, the first pictures led to the discovery that the image on the cloth is actually a negative. And the image becomes a positive and photographic negative. So the discovery startled the scientific community. And in 1938, there was a photographer photographed the shroud again with a more advanced film technology, confirming that the shroud is indeed a negative image. And copies of this INRI's photos were circulated throughout the world. And so in 1950, Dr. Barbet, it's a prominent French surgeon, published a doctorate at Calvary documenting 15 years of medical research on the shroud image. He described the physiology and the pathology of the man on the shroud as anatomically perfect. So anybody who's going to say that it was painted in the medieval time. Okay, first of all, ridiculous. No, it was not, because if it wasn't, it had to be painted by a doctor. And furthermore, we'll talk about why it's not painted. In 1973, Max Frey, it's a noted Swiss criminologist, was given permission to take dust samples from the shroud that contained much pollen. And he discovered 22 pollens, species from plants that are unique to areas around Constantinople and Edessa, and 7 pollen species from plants common only in Israel. So that's important. In 1975, Air Force scientists John Jackson and Eric Jumper, using VP8 image, it's an analyzer designed for the space program, discovered that the shroud image contained encoded 3D data not found in ordinary reflected light photographs. And that discovery indicated that the cloth must have wrapped an actual real human figure at the time the image was formed. So we already know all those people who are saying it's a painting, preposterous. In 1978, the Shroud was on public exhibit for the first time in 1933 and was displayed for 6 weeks. And at the close of the exhibition, 24 scientists comprising the Shroud of Turin research project analyzed the Shroud for 5 continuous days. Well, thank you, for 122 hours. And in 1980, National Geographic magazine published a landmark article on the Shroud, further propelling the cloth into the science limelight. It called one of the most perplexing enigmas of modern time. So in 1980, the same year, there was a doctor, a scientist, Walter McCrone, who was not part of the Shroud project, was given several fibers to analyze. And after finding iron oxide particles and single particle of vermilion paint, he broke ranks with the Shroud scientists who had agreed to make all the findings public the following year. McCrone proposed that the Shroud was a painting of red ochre paint created from iron oxide particles suspended in thin Binder solution. However, McCrone's findings in no way agreed with any of the highly sophisticated tests. And all of his claims have all been dismissed. By the way, it turns out the iron oxide is a natural result of soaking the linen for days, where iron ions from the water attached to the fibers from oxidize. So, in 1981, after 3 years analyzing the data, the Shroud of Turin research project made their findings public at an international conference in New London, Connecticut. Every one of the scientists agreed. We can conclude for now that the Shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. The blood stains are composed of hemoglobin and give a positive test for this. Well, so you naysayers out there, well, look at there. And by the way, 1988, the Shroud was carbon dated by 3 laboratories, Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona. They indicated a date range from 1260 to 1390, indicating the cloth to be only 700 years old. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? In 1997, a very prominent Israeli botanist and professor at Hebrew University confirmed the presence of flower images on the Shroud. He verified 28 different pollen species or plant images. And many are, by the way, are plants that grow only around Jerusalem. So in 2002, the Shroud was restored to remove charred debris from the fire in 1532 to aid in the cloth's preservation. That is the patch, by the way. For those of you who want to say, aha, it proves that it wasn't. Nope. In 1988, they were given permission to take parts of the Shroud from the patches that was restored from the charred debris, because they had it in a monastery and it had caught fire. So what they did, and it didn't, the whole thing wasn't destroyed. It was just the outer parts of it. And so nuns were able to kind of restore it by sewing different material onto it. That is actually what they took. So unfortunately, what it could do. So in 2004, textile expert revealed that the stitching of a seam on the Shroud that runs the entire length, known as the side strip, is typical of Jewish burial shrouds found in Israel. And in 2004, chemical research on image fibers often offers clues as to how the image was formed. The entire cloth is covered with a razor-thin layer of carbohydrates that adhere to the linen after being soaked in a soap weed detergent as part of an ancient manufacturing process. So something has interacted with the carbo layer, resulting in a discoloration of the cloth near or direct contact with the body is what causes the image to be visible. And now 2005, thermochemist Ray Rogers followed up on the new spectroscopic data showing the material of the corner cut for carbon dating may be different from the rest of the Shroud. It was. He obtained thread samples from C14 corner and thread samples from the interior of the Shroud. Additional microchemical and spectroscopic tests showed the samples were not the same. So in other words, what he's saying is he was able to give permission from the interior of the shroud rather than the ends of it. Because when they took the ends of it and they said, aha, it's 1500s, everybody thought that it's fake. No. But he was able to take the inner parts as well as the outer parts and carbon date them. And results published in a peer-reviewed journal confirm initial concerns. The sample cut for C14 dating appears to be from medieval reweave instead of the initial shroud, which I said. So that's what happens. So in 2011, European researchers with ENEA were able to replicate the depth and coloration of the shroud using a 40 nanosecond burst from the UV laser. That's the first time any aspect of the image has been reproduced using light in 2011. So we couldn't recreate. In the 15th century, you have to understand, we could not even recreate the shroud that it is today. So in 2011, it took a powerful laser to reproduce this using light in 2011. But then people are going to tell us, well, it was a manufactured cloth in the 15th century. Okay. In 2013, researchers with a university in Italy, using multiple samples from other linens of known age, ranging from the current era to 3000 BC, were able to develop a predictable rate of chemical and mechanical decay. And comparing fibers from the shroud, they estimate and they determined that the shroud estimated date range was from 280 BC to 220 AD. Okay. So we know with all the testing that's done, there's no inorganic pigments present. That means paint. There's no paint that has ever been present on any of the testing. There was no substances manually applied to the cloth. So this we already know through all the testing that they've done. There is no artistic substances are on the cloth. No collagen binder as would be used with paint. Blood tests positive that were there, and other blood components. The blood, by the way, is AB positive with human DNA. So the blood marks seen on the shroud are consistent with the contact transfer to the cloth of blood clot that would have resulted from major wounds inflicted on a man who died in the position of crucifixion, Dr. Al Adler. So we absolutely, we know for a fact that there are no chemical or physical methods known which can account for the totality of the image, nor can any combination of physical, chemical, biological, or medical circumstances explain the image adequately. We can conclude for now that the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. The bloodstains are composed and also given a positive test for such, and that it was the final conclusion. It's really powerful. I think the shroud is quite clear that there was the blood on the head from crowns of thorns, the abrasions and bruises on face, the wound on the side where the soldier pierced Christ on the side. By the way, you might want to listen to this. Over 120 scourge whip marks. Over 120 whip marks. We see blood on the arms, a nail wound to the wrist, nail wound to the feet. Legs were not broken. That's important because many times, as I mentioned, crucifixion would take a time before a person would expire. And so what the Romans would do is they would take a huge hammer and break the legs of the crucified, because then the person couldn't stand up anymore or, kind of get the air in the lungs. So they couldn't do it anymore. They couldn't push up anymore. But that's why the Romans were so surprised that Jesus had passed so quickly. And that's why they did the spear, because they were going to break the legs, but their legs were not broken. There is post-mortem blood flow from side wound and on the back. The legs are pulled up due to rigor mortis, and blood is from actual wounds and show evidence of gravity from a vertical position, meaning obviously on the crucifix. And no stains on body decomposition. So when you see that, that is absolutely powerful. Truly powerful. So to me, there's no doubt in my mind, no doubt that the shroud is a legitimate, the burial cloth of Christ. And I don't know. That's pretty interesting about the blood, though, isn't it? I've got to figure out what. I don't know what my blood. I'd love to know, just out of curiosity. Is anybody that type of blood? AB positive? No, there was certainly no one in recorded history had the crown of thorns placed on their head and mocked as King of the Jews as Jesus was. So the Romans would not have done that to every single person. So this, we clearly see the crown of thorns. We see the with the blood stains and even the embedded marks for the crown. You absolutely can see that. There's no doubt about that. So that in of itself, I think, is enough for me. And of course, the spear to the side is enough to tell me, okay, that's the body of Christ. But yeah, his was they have AB positive with human DNA. So AB, I don't know how. I have no idea. I'm not really into. I don't know a whole lot about medical, but I don't know if AB positive is that common. Or is that not common? I'd be curious to see what the. So for those of you who are, AB positive may donate to all blood types. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, it's not common. Okay. See, I don't know. I very rare. Okay. Oh, see, so we're learning. It's the most. Okay. All right, and if you have any questions, you can jump into them and you can ask them. I do have stories about miracles that I wanted to get to as well, because some of these stories are absolutely amazing. So if you have questions, you can jump in. You can ask about them. I'll be happy to entertain, do the best I can, and kind of go from there. But I absolutely believe, I am convinced, no doubt about it, that the shroud is legitimate. And I believe that even if, like I said, even if you're not a follower of Christ, it is on. Well, periodically it is on display. The shroud right now is located on the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, and that's in Turin, Italy. So for those of you, you can go on. You can actually see it there, and so. It's really not, but I mean, they will allow it to be viewable on certain days, but it's not on public display all the time, because it's very fragile. So they got to be very careful. Yep, you want to see the picture? Yep. So you can see where the head, where the crown of thorns would have been. Yep. I do believe in Fatima. Yeah, I do believe in Fatima. Now you can see, you can see the rails. I mean, you can see the nails that were clearly on the wrist, and that's where they would have crucified. They were crucified on the wrist, because as I mentioned, the wrists were a part of the hand at this time. So that's probably, yeah. How tall? It is believed, there are some people that believe that he had a kind of not an Arnold Schwarzenegger, build, but he had there was some muscles that you can clearly see and that are defined. And it was about 5'7". Now there's some debates whether it was 5'7" to 6'2". And so I think 6'2" would have been pretty tall in Jesus's time. So it makes sense to me that probably, I would say probably between 5'5", 5'7", maybe. Probably that. I think that's probably the height of Christ. Could be 5'8", but I wouldn't think any higher than that. I wouldn't. No, actually, Cheryl, we're not doing Good Paranormal on Friday. Actually, I've just done an 1.5-hour presentation on the Crucifixion and the Shroud of Turin. So that's welcome. Appreciate you being here. But no, Cheryl, no, we're not. I've been here since 7:00. Oh yeah, you missed it. Yeah, you might want to go back. It was pretty cool, Cheryl. We talked about the medical aspects of the crucifixion, and I gave a medical perspective on what happened, and pretty powerful what he endured. So yeah, and I agree. That's one of the reasons why I didn't want to do ghosts and goblins and werewolves and vampires on Good Friday. I just to me, I was like, no, let's it's Good Friday. We can do that. We can always do that every other Friday. So that's what we decided to do this. But if you do have any questions, do you have a rendition of a Christ? What do you mean? What do I have a rendition? You have to explain to me. What do you mean by that? The most amazing miracle. I would say, honestly, for me, the miracle of the Eucharist. Probably, yeah, I would say the miracle of the Eucharist. And what I mean by that is, for those of you who don't know, so I was at a paranormal conference, and there was a gentleman who came up to me who was about to receive communion, and he had his arms like this, which means I can't receive for whatever reason. And normally you just bless them and they move on. But for some reason, I was really, I don't know why. And normally I wouldn't do this, but the music was playing, so no one could hear us. And I asked him, I said, would you like to receive communion? And he said, I can't. So why not? And he said, well, because my wife cheated on me. She left me. We got a divorce. That was 15 years ago. And the priest said that I was in mortal sin and I cannot ever receive communion. I said, wait a minute. Your wife cheated on you. She divorced you. And your priest told you can never receive communion again. He said, yes. And his eyes began to swell up with tears. And then I said, would you like to receive communion today? And he said, yes. And he started shaking because he was, because all that stuff that had weighed him down. And for 15 years, the man had not received communion. Holding on to that false teaching that pastor told him. And I distributed communion and he just sobbed. I mean, he just sobbed. And so, of course, I was, embraced him and he was just shaking. He was just shaking. But he let all that go. He let all that junk go, telling, all these 15 years of being told how he was going to burn in the fiery pits of hell because his wife cheated on him and his wife divorced him. And then the pastor made him to be the guilty one. So that was that to me, that was a very powerful moment. Very, very powerful. So let's talk about miracles, because I want to share some miracles with you guys that you may not have heard. This is pretty amazing because modern day miracles do exist. On August the 17th, 2012, listen to this, everybody. Michael Crow from Nebraska, he was 23 years old at the time, was rushed to the emergency room by his mom, and his heart was pumping out blood at an alarmingly low rate of 25%. It was even down to 10% when they transferred to another hospital an hour later. He was suffering from an inflammation of the heart muscle called acute myocarditis, I think, and other organs were starting to fail. So when doctors finally found a match for a heart transplant 17 days later, Crow developed a blood infection, and the procedure would be dangerous. And then one of his doctors noticed something unusual. His blood pressure was rising. And after a test, it revealed that the left side of his heart was working at near normal capacity. An ultrasound soon revealed that the left chamber of Crow's heart was working normally again. Just a few days later, his heart was working on its own. An MRI scan found no permanent damage or scars. His heart miraculously healed itself, and his body eradicated the virus on its own. The story of the church did a special prayer service for him that night. And his body began to heal. That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. We don't hear a lot of miracle stories today, but I think that we need to. There was an individual and his younger brother, Edgar, was on a regular work day, and they were set to clean the window of a 47th luxury tower building on the morning of December 7th, 2007. Well, but an accident sent their window washing platform plunging to the concrete pavement and fell from the skyscraper. The accident unfortunately killed his brother, and when firefighters arrived at the scene of the accident, this individual was sitting upright, semi-conscious. He was rushed to a nearby hospital and induced into a coma. He sustained injuries to his brain, spinal column, chest, and abdomen, had fractures to his ribs and both legs. He underwent numerous operations, and when he woke up nearly 3 weeks later on Christmas Day in 2007, with his wife, Rosaria, at his bedside, and after a year, he was able to walk again. The miracle in his life allowed him to have his fourth child with his wife. And there was one, someone did an interview with him once, and he quickly prayed while he was going down. And he says that saved his life. Am I barely? No. So that's pretty amazing. I think that's very amazing. That's pretty amazing. By the way, there was a Padre Pio. I don't know. I I've done some investigation on Padre Pio. I have some concern with Padre Pio, but I don't want to certainly talk ill of the dead. But there's a little concern that I have. But there have been miracles that people have claimed that they have received with Padre Pio. So I don't know. Listen to this. The Vatican confirms a Colorado boy was healed by a nun. After a 14-year process, the Vatican released its verdict on a young boy's sudden recovery from a debilitating gastrointestinal condition. It was a miracle. In 1998, doctors tried every possible way to cure 4-year-old Luke Berge. Every day for 6 months, Luke experienced 8 to 10 painful bouts of diarrhea. And Luke's mother, a devout Catholic, began looking outside for medicine for cure. She asked nuns to pray for Luke. Sister Margaret Mary Preister and the late Sister Evangeline Spinner knew what to do. And they asked the founder of the order, Mother Bonzel, a German nun, who had been deceased for more than a decade, to intercede. In 1863, Bonzel founded the Sisters of St. Francis of Perpetual Adoration in Germany. She devoted her life to educating and giving health care to the needy children. For 9 days, Sister Margaret Mary and Sister Spinner prayed for Luke. As soon as their novena was complete, Luke woke up. His stomach no longer hurt him. The illness had never returned. And Luke continued his life and grew up to be a healthy, 6-foot, teenage, passionate young man about BMX racing. That to me is just stunning. Oh, wow. Alicia says, I have a testimony about Padre Pio. She says she prayed to him for intercession and then was freed from her drug addiction. Wow, that is amazing. See, I think we in this world, we have kind of forgotten that miracles they still exist. And then I understand people get angry about, well, why didn't it happen to me? Why couldn't the miracle happen to me? We have to be careful. We have to be very careful with being bitter because some people, receive miracles and, while we may be still struggling. You don't want to ever do that. You don't want to ever get to that point. Look, there have been people who have had damage to the brain from football and they suffer from chronic migraines and, of course, cluster headaches. And they have prayed and prayed, and they have come out and they've given their testimony, and they said that they were healed, and they no longer suffer from cluster headaches. They no longer suffer from chronic migraines. They were completely healed. Here's the deal. I would love to be healed from chronic migraines and cluster headaches. Love it. It would be wonderful. But I'm not going to be bitter towards those people who have had that healing. I'm glad, and I give God all the praise that those individuals are no longer suffering from cluster headaches. Because if you've ever had a cluster headache, you know what I'm talking about. Now, I get cluster headaches all the time. They are far worse than a migraine. And so, and I suffered them because I played football. And I had a lot of concussions playing football, and they didn't understand football back, when I was playing. And they just didn't understand the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s. They just didn't get it. They didn't know. So I had a lot of concussions. And so that's one of the things I suffer from. I suffer from cluster headaches and chronic migraines. And it's no fun. But I do know that the people that were healed, I think that's wonderful, and their testimony is important. But you can't be bitter because someone receives a healing and you are still struggling with it. It's easy to fall into that temptation, but you can't do it. You can't do it. And you shouldn't do it. I think it's very dangerous to get into that category. Listen to this. This is interesting. You were healed from epilepsy. Wow. And well, that's wonderful. That is terrific. I was healed from depression by reading the New Testament. You felt such joy and peace. See, that's what I'm saying. All these, there's so many. I love these because, see, there's so for 1.5 years, and there are lots of people giving testimony on TikTok. And I'm telling you, and Bishop, my nephew was supposed to be born with a hole in his heart. We prayed so much that when he was born, doctors didn't see a hole anymore. He's a healthy 18-year-old now. See, that's, folks, there are miracles happening. They still happen. And then people get angry with God because they say, there's no more miracles. There's no more. There are miracles. Every single day, you and I have received a miracle. No, I did not. I did not receive a miracle. You woke up. You see, the fact that our body goes to sleep and we're not even thinking about breathing, that our body just naturally does it. And the fact that we woke up is a miracle in of itself. So we take sometimes life for granted, that we are able to think, that we have intellect, that we're able to speak our mind, and we're able to debate, and we're able. This is a miracle in of itself. Because there are many people today, and as clergy, I can tell you this is true because I've spoken to quite a few people this afternoon who have called me because their loved ones did not wake up in this world today. Yeah, they woke up certainly in heaven, which is praise God for it. But there's a lot of people who did not wake up today. So don't take life for granted. Please pray for my lungs and my son's lungs. Certainly will, Amber. Yeah. This is why I ask you, please go to night prayer with us. And go to night prayer. And that will be wonderful. Well, again, if for some people do not eat meat for Lent, and that is their choice, that they choose to give up something for Lent, and that they have that right. They have the right to do that. I don't know why we attack people because they chose to give up. I mean, why? So now we're attacking people because they choose to give up meat for Lent. If they want to give up meat for Lent, okay, fine. If they want to give up sweets for Lent, okay, fine. If they want to add something to their normal schedule in recognition and remembering Lent, fine. People are always so worried about what everybody else is doing. Okay, listen to this one. Rob Small. I did. Survives a blaze that lit him like a human torch. This is crazy. Rob Small underwent 30 operations after he suffered major fire burns. He baffled doctors who feared that Small may not survive the burns. Half of his body was almost burnt by the horrific fire incident, and doctors claimed that he had only 30% chances or lower of survival. But a miracle gene in his body helped him recover from the burn. Rob Small was in a coma for a month before recovering, and he was trapped in a blaze when he tried to flee the wreckage, and accidentally he stepped on a puddle of petrol, setting him ablaze like a human torch. His survival and recovery is considered as a miraculous medical recovery in the history of mankind. Rob Small, yeah, you can do that research, but that is absolutely stunning. Okay. So, all right, let's get into, if you have any questions, we can get into some of your questions and go from there, because I think I have a lot. I have so many more I could easily share with you, but I want to hear, well, you gave up meat. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. I do believe in Guadalupe. Someone was asking about Guadalupe. I do believe in Guadalupe. Our Lady Guadalupe. For those sightings of the Virgin Mary have happened all throughout history. But there was one specific time Mary appeared to a Mexican peasant named Juan Diego in 1531. And so Mary requested a temple to be built and told Juan Diego to ask the bishop nearby to build it. So Diego went, but the bishop didn't believe him. And the bishop requested a sign. If you have a miracle, then I need a sign. So Mary provided a sign in two ways. Diego was told to pick roses from a barren hill and put them in his cloak. And when he did this, he brought the roses to the bishop, and out of his cloak came a painting of the Mother Mary. And that portrait exists even today. It's said to be perfectly preserved, despite no alterations or anyone doing a thing to it. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Justin says, when I was a kid, I tried to give up school for Lent. That's fun. That's funny. I have a couple of miracles. No question. There was a miracle. No doubt about this. When I was going to the seminary, one of the seminary closed because of finances. So this is an undergraduate. So I had to go to another seminary. I had to visit a couple of seminaries. So I went to Minnesota, and I really didn't like their undergraduate seminary program. They had a great graduate seminary program, but not an undergraduate. And so then I flew back to Chicago to check out Loyola University and St. Joseph Seminary. And it was a 50-seater jet. And this was at like at 9 o'clock at night. And I remember that it was a severe storm in Chicago. Dangerous. I mean, tornadoes. And it was 9 o'clock, and we were flying, I think, through Midway. And the thunder and lightning was so bad. The lightning was so bad, it lit up the entire sky. And it was like in the middle of the day. It was 9 p.m. at night, but it was like the lightning was everywhere. It was like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. That's how much lightning was in the sky. And as we were getting ready to go in for approach, we heard a pop, a really loud pop. And the APU, which is called the Auxiliary Power Unit, the engines completely stopped. Everything stopped. You couldn't hear anything. Only thing I could hear is the wind to the window. And then the emergency lights came on. The flight attendant came running from the back to the top, and she picked up the phone. Her face was just pale as a ghost. And she immediately hung up the phone, and she said, "Head down, stay down, head down, stay down." She was screaming, "Head down, stay down." And at this time, we were probably not very high, and we weren't close to the airport. And I looked out the window because I like window seats, and I saw trees and I saw houses, and we were getting closer and closer to the trees and houses, and we weren't even close to the runway. And I said, "Okay, I surrendered." I said, "Okay, God, I'm ready to come home." And so I said a quick prayer, "Forgive me for my sins." And some other things, and my life did flash before my eyes. I could see myself as a baby. It was so fast, it was so fast from a baby all the way to where I was then. And I surrendered, and I was at peace, and I knew that we were going to crash. And I was like, okay. And as soon as I surrendered and I said, "Oh, I'm ready to go," then we jerked back. the engines kicked on. We were probably at this time maybe 20 feet from the trees and the houses. We jerked back. It was so violent that a woman actually broke her seat, broke one of the things that I put into the seat. I mean, it jerked back really bad, and we took off, and then we kind of went around a couple of times, and the captain came on and said, "We're coming in. We're gonna land this plane, and I'm going to tell you now, we're going to land hard." So because he was not going to do it anymore, we were going to land, and so we did, and we landed hard. But he was going to put that plane on the ground, whether come hell or high water, we are going to get on that ground. And when he did, everybody applauded. But that was definitely one time that I was ready to go. So I just surrendered, and I said, "There's nothing I can do. I can't control it." So I like, okay. And another time, I clinically died. So I was doing. It's a very powerful story. I was doing a procedure, a medical procedure. And in 2014, I was supposed to have it, but my mom kept telling me, "James, I don't feel right about the procedure. Don't do it." And because I had to have an upper scope. And I said, "Okay, I won't." And so I didn't. And then in 2014, we discovered that she had a brain tumor. And she had surgery. She had complications from the surgery, and she passed. Well, had I done that surgery, I probably would have bled out, because at that time I had stomach tumors. And but they did a scope. So she had passed, and they did a scope, and I remember waking up. So I was awake, complete like I am now. I know what a dream is. This was not a dream. I was completely aware, completely conscious. I was totally aware, but I did not recognize that I was the patient. I remember seeing the doctor. I couldn't hear him, but I saw him, and he was freaking out. And I was frustrated because I couldn't tell him, "It's going to be okay. Calm down. How can I help you?" Never did it dawn on me that I was the patient. He was saying something to the person behind me. There was a really loud noise going off behind me. It was annoying. I couldn't turn around for some reason and see what was going on. And the brightest light, I know it's cliche, but it happened. The brightest light came right behind this doctor. My mom a woman walked up to him, and she looked like an angel. I mean, her joy, the face, I can't describe the joy. There's no words will describe it. The joy and happiness in her face was unbelievable, unbelievable. And I looked even closer, and I thought, I know her. And then I recognized that's Mom, because she looked a lot younger. And she's beautiful. I mean, she looked like an angel, beautiful. She put her hand on his shoulders. The doctor then took a deep breath and did something like this to, I guess, a person behind me. That loud noise went off. She smiled, and she faded away. Well, I had talked to doctor, and then when I came to in the recovery room, my sister Jennifer was there, and I was screaming, "I saw Mom, I saw Mom." And Jennifer was like, "We know you saw Mom. The entire hospital knows you saw Mom, because you were screaming at the top of your lungs from the operating room to the recovery room." I don't remember that. But I talked to Dr. Jeffrey Long, who's the world leading expert on near-death experiences. Now, I encourage you to go to his site, nderf.org. ND, as in dog, erf.org. He is the world leading expert on near-death experiences. And I had him on my show twice. And he's a medical doctor. And I told him the story. He said, "James, do you realize that you flatlined?" He said, "The loud noise that was going off behind you was the anesthesiologist machine going off when you flatline, because it alerts them. And the fact that your mom put her hand on the doctor's shoulders makes perfect sense, because your mom worked in cardiology. She was guiding the doctor." All right, Mr. Producer. And that really hit me. When he said that, that hit me like a ton of bricks. I was live on the show, and that almost took my breath. And he said, the fact that you were screaming you saw your mom over and over and over from the operating room to the recovery room, you couldn't have faked that, because you were under propofol. And that you still have you couldn't have faked that. And the fact is there's no such thing as dreaming. There's a 0% chance of dreaming in propofol. It doesn't occur. You don't go into REM, which is rapid eye movement. So you don't go into sleep. It is 0% chance. So he said, there's no question that you clinically died and you saw your mom, which I know I did. And I don't know. I guess it was the heart. I'm not for sure what because I do know that the nurse that was in the operating room, She was the one that wheeled me down, and she was in the room, and I told her, I said, something happened. I know something happened in that room. She said, sir, I can't talk to you about that. You have to talk to your surgeon. So she wouldn't discuss it. And I asked her, why are you wheeling me down? They have porters to do that. Why are you doing this? She said, sir, I can't talk about the situation. You have to, she wouldn't talk to me because I know what happened. And so I am absolutely 1,000,000% convinced that I saw my mom. She was absolutely beautiful. You have nothing to fear when it comes to death. Friends, you have nothing to fear. And I promise you that life on the other side, if life on the other side is as joyful as what I saw on my mom's face, then I can't wait to get there. Because the joy and peace that was in her face, I want that. It was unbelievable. For those of you on Spreaker, I'm going to have to say goodnight to you guys. TikTok, stay with me because I'm going to be doing a Bible study coming up at the top of the hour with everybody. So I'm not going anywhere. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Remember, I'll be here tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Miss Wilma. And remember that your value does not decrease based on someone's inability or refusal to see your worth. You're priceless. And don't let anybody tell you or convince you otherwise. So Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, KGRADB Radio. God bless. The Sacred Division has been brought to you by Bishop Long's online paranormal course. Learn demonology, angelology, paranormal studies, and genealogy. It's 100% online, and you learn at your own pace. Please go to www.bishopjameslong.com and click on the paranormal course link.